Okay, do we have some sound? I don't. No sound. Oh, hi. That's yes, lots of yes. Oh, you can hear me now. Oh, perfect. Perfect. Is the sound okay? Because I think I'm on a different microphone now to the one that I would usually use. For some reason, that was deciding it wasn't working this morning. I don't know why. So as long as you can hear me, that's all that matters. Got sound. Yes, we have sound. Seems okay. Sound is good. Oh, hi, Helen. Helen Brand, and also Helen, my sister's here as well. So hello to you both. This microphone is great. Oh, thanks, Grandma Bonnie. Perfect. I'll have to find out why the other one isn't working. Yeah, there will be background noise on this one, Dawn. I don't know why, because my other one, for some reason, doesn't work, or I've unplugged it and plugged it back in a couple of times. Let me just see. No, that one's fine. Audio. Video. That's fine. Audio. Should be back again now. Am I back again now? The sound should be back. For some reason, I'm going to have to go through this microphone. Yep. Good, good, good. Right, that's just confirmed to me what might be the problem anyway, so I can fiddle around with that later on, and I shall get going. Yeah, you can hear Hazel. Yeah, she decided she's seeing something outside. Okay. Right, perfect. I shall get going. So I thought I'd use the tulips again today. I used them on my live on Tuesday, so I should do something a little bit different today, and it's possibly what I'll do going forward on the weeks that I have 2 lives with you. I might try and use the same products on both days just to give you 2 lots of inspiration, and that way we can build up a nice library on YouTube as well for inspiration for you to go back to and refer to, unless there's things like new product launches or something that Lisa specifically wants us to show you, or something that I just might get too excited about and I feel like trying. So if that's all right with you, I might sort of give you 2 lots of inspiration with 1 set of products each week. So let's get going. For anybody who is new to the lives with us, hello, lovely to have you here. My name's Claire, for the Lisa Horton Crafts YouTube channel and also live on Facebook. I've been on Lisa's design team from the beginning, so it's quite exciting coming up to February, which is Lisa's or the Lisa Horton Crafts birthday event, sort of 4 years. So the time has flown, and there's so much more exciting stuff to happen. So yeah, it's really nice to be able to sort of continue on the journey with her. I've been doing the lives. I can't think how long I've been doing the lives now. It's been a good couple of years. Maybe Dawn can let us give us an idea. I don't know. Sort of the time flies by so quick. I'd say a good couple of years I've been doing this, and there's an awful lot of videos on YouTube now between myself and Dawn, and also Natalia, Maria, who does little reels as well, perfect little quick snippets of quick makes, which Natalia and Maria both put onto YouTube also, as well as onto Facebook and Instagram, and I think maybe even TikTok, although I'm not particularly versed on TikTok either. That's something I might have to teach myself to do at some stage. Right, so as I say, I'm using the tulips again today, something completely different to what I made on Tuesday. I'm just looking to see where that card is I made on Tuesday. Okay, so those of you who didn't join us on Tuesday, this is the card I made with the tulips. So you can see that between the two, as well as the colours, it is a completely different thing, completely different project. This is already on YouTube, ready for you to refer back to. But this one is a lot more sort of spring-like. Still working on a 5x7 inch card blank, which I think is quite important for us to show, because these products are actually designed, these particular ones are designed as the slimline collection. So therefore we have the DL shape embossing folder and the DL shape stencils, but that doesn't limit you to using these particular designs on that shaped card blank or that shaped project. So I've cut it down. They work perfectly on a 5x7. This can equally be adapted to go onto a smaller cardstock for those in the US and Canada who perhaps make smaller cards, but they'd also fully adaptable and full, you know, perfect for projects on square cards also. So I'll just run through quickly what I'm using. I shall just put up a quick slide for you so you have the, let's press show. There we are. So this is what I'm using. The stencils for the tulips are in stock at the moment. The dies in the embossing folder isn't, but if you are a long-standing watcher of us, you may well have these anyway. So we have those two products. I've also used an embossing folder in the back here, which if I just perhaps, there you go, you can see that now. I've chosen this one, which is the wood panel. It's a 5x7 embossing folder, so perfect obviously for this project. But you can choose whichever embossing folder you use, that you have. I've used also, now this is possibly a little bit naughty of me, this was just a little bonus set that was on Create and Craft at some stage, but I really like the dots that were in this to stamp in the background there, which if I just raise that up again, I mean that is entirely optional, and I can perhaps show you a different workaround, or it's something you may be able to use paint splatters or something with as well. But just I was making cards with this the other day, and you know what it's like when you get it in your brain. I just that this was just a really nice little accent point, because the cards I was making for someone else, I put these on them all in different colours, and it looked really nice. So I thought that they'd look really nice as tulips, sort of the hint of tulips in the background. And also what I will be using for the sentiment in the background just a little bit later are the sentiments from this set here, with the How Many Candles set, which is a set of dies and stamps. Obviously you get all the candles, you get a die cut sentiments as well, but I like the fonts on these little stamps here, so that's what I'll be using a little bit later. So we'll get stenciling, and I shall bring in my Ultimate 2. Again, I have the magnetic base plate in this, because the Ultimate, as it stands alone, you have the scoring board on the back, but this one isn't magnetic, and it will come with your silicone mat. You see mine is well used. But you can get the magnetic mat, obviously, which then you can use with your magnets to hold your projects in place. So then, other than the stamping platform, which makes this different to the Ultimate one, you can do everything on this platform. So I've cut myself a little piece of card already, a third of an A4 basically. So this is a DL shaped stencil, which generally works out about 10 centimeters wide by 20 centimeters wide, but obviously whatever little bit of cardstock to use would be perfect. This is Lisa's Super Smooth, so I know that the inks blend onto this perfectly. The inks I'm using today are a little bit brighter than I would normally use, which are a little bit brighter than I used on Tuesday. So we have Margarita, Woodland Moss, Rustic Coral, Sweet Violet and Surf's Up. So you can see them listed on the side there. And these are my preferred colours for any foliage that I go to. And then I just wanted to use a different set of colours for the flowers, because obviously on the tulips I stenciled on Tuesday, I used yellow. Okay, that's that. So we have our stencil sitting here. Our stencils are a set of 6 for this particular tulip. They're usually detailed on the packaging as well. So if you are unsure, just check back to the packaging, and you can usually sort of work back from there to make sure that when you've packed everything the way, that you haven't forgotten anything. So let's get stenciling. Right, the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to stencil first with the Margarita, and then I shall do shading with the Woodland Moss. So that will just give the different layers of foliage different looks, basically. And it's that will set apart the different layers of foliage that we have on here. That will just add to the dimensional nature of the image that we're trying to stencil. You don't have to use 2 colours, you can do it with the 1 colour as well, and by using different sized stencil brushes and just adding different intensities of the 1 colour through each stencil layer. So it's something that we always bear in mind when we stencil for you and do the lives for you. So we try to talk through our colour choices. We try and talk through our techniques that we're using just to help you along. For one, it gives the regulars who come to watch different colour combinations to try. It just perhaps reinforces in the techniques you can use just to help out if you're having some issues with the images not turning out quite the way that you expected. And sometimes you can just have a brain blank and not quite know what colour combinations to use. And also, if you're new to us, then yeah, we just try and give as much information to help you get the best out of these products that we possibly can, because we believe that everybody can achieve what we make for you here. And sometimes it takes us a couple of goes. We do have to prep. I certainly prep and test out my colour choices before I come on air, just to make sure things are working right. And some days they work quicker and better than others. So, but yeah, it's all about trial and error, isn't it? So I've come on to stencil number 2 here. So this is the stems for the actual flowers. So I'm going to concentrate on these particular stems and just do them slightly darker at the top, because when we've got the bloom at the top of this stem, it's going to cast a bit of a shadow, isn't it, just underneath. So that's sort of my thinking in where I'm placing the ink there initially. So that's why I went in with the Woodland moss to start with, and then I'm going to come in with the Margarita for the rest of them, and then just reshade again in a second with the Woodland moss. Now, as with some stencils, there are, because the nature of the detail that Lisa includes on them, there are going to be some quite delicate areas to your stencils, which is worth just noting. And you can see a couple of areas here. My lights are quite bright at the moment, so it might actually wash out that. So if I raise this up, you can see there are a couple of really delicate pieces of the stencil there that don't actually lay flat. Now what you need to do is just be a little bit mindful when you're stenciling over them, and just work in the direction that these naturally want to sit. So there'd be no point me trying to work upwards on this part of the stencil, because that's basically going to keep flicking that part of the stencil up, and it will eventually damage that part of the stencil, which you don't want really if we can possibly help it. So it's best just to say work into the way that they want to sit, and if it just means altering the way that you add the ink for this part of the stencil, then it's just worth bearing that in mind. I think it's a small price to pay to have that little, to have that added detail that Lisa can bring to these stencils, because yeah, it just sets Lisa apart with the detail that she can include. And when I pull that away now, you can see that just by being gentle at that part of the stencil there, you can see the detail that we have sitting in the design there. And not every stencil will have such delicate areas. It's just, you'll see that when you start practicing for the first time. Sometimes you will catch them. We all do that. I mean, there's some stencils that I go quite vigorous in, and I think, oh, perhaps I shouldn't have done that there. But it's always able to work that out and sort of just sit that back into the design. So now I'm on stencil 3. So now we can start coming into the colour of the blooms. Now this can be any choice. You can choose your choice and your favourite colours of tulips. The person you're going to give it to, choose their favourite colour, or just experiment and just go wild with something quite different. So I'm using the Rustic Coral today. And I'm adding this with a stencil brush. Now, the way I'm adding this initially, I'm concentrating a lot of the colour at the base of the flowers initially and then working upwards. So I'm hoping that, or the idea is that the top of the flowers are going to be slightly lighter than the base. And that way we achieve, again, it makes them look dimensional, even before we think about embossing, which then adds even more detail, of course, to them. So I'm going to work most of the colour into the base, and then obviously that blending out will mean that the top of the flower gets coloured also. You'll find your preferred way of stenciling. This is the way, say, if you're familiar with the way that I stencil, that's how I begin colouring all of my images. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to come in with the Sweet Violet. Now, I find red quite tricky, or all shades of red before it goes into pink, quite tricky to shade and quite tricky to work with, but I've worked out that purple is a really good way to add shadow to red. So you want to pick up a little bit of the purple, use your stencil as a palette, so you take off the majority of ink onto the stencil, then you start pushing that in through the aperture of the stencil. And what that will do, will start adding some shading, and it keeps the tone of the red, but adds that shadow without altering the colour. It's really clever. So if you are in that position where you love red but struggle to shade with it, because there is only so much red that you can add, and sometimes if you add another red, or what you think looks like a darker red in the ink pads, it doesn't always work. So sometimes it's best just to go with something completely different, and for me purple works really well with red. And I'm just adding that to the base of the flowers, so there'll be no purple sitting at the top of the flowers, it's just at the base. And when I take the stencil away, you'll just see just that shading that's given, which works out really nicely, even on screen, before I've even added any extra detail or even any embossing. It works out really, really nicely. So if we come in stencil 4, and we go back to the red, or we go back to the coral, the rustic coral, and we add the details to the flower in exactly the same way as I did to the first layer of colour. So the majority of the ink will be sitting at the base of the flowers. So we still have that little bit of shading in the top, or the lighter area at the top of these blooms. And this detail of the flower, even on the lighter parts of the flower, will still show. I'll show you in a second. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to leave that there, to take that away, and you can see the detail appearing in the flower there. Okay. Now, before I move on from this stencil, I'm going to go back in with the purple and do exactly the same as I did before. So the highlights of these flowers, again, will just be brought out with that little bit of purple as well. And so just brushing that purple onto the flower. And you will see that it blends into that red so nicely, or the coral so nicely. And as it dries, it diffuses out even more. So I'll show you now and the difference from not adding the purple. Can you see that? Perhaps I'll just put that there. Yeah, there we are. You can see now how these parts of the flowers are really quite deep in colour. And the fact that we've got slightly lighter areas here just adds, I think it's so clever, which this is the system that Lisa has given us, which has levelled the playing field and allowed everybody to be able to achieve these results. Again, it is just a case of playing and having the confidence. So stencil number 5, we have the rest of the foliage. So I'm going to go quite dark with this one, with the Woodland Moss. Again, because I won't use Margarita on this particular layer, and this will set this layer of foliage apart from the rest of the other foliage, which again, so we have 3 different layers of foliage there. I'll take that away. You can see now that that foliage is slightly different, which just adds more interest, just gives the eye something else to look at. And our last stencil, see, this comes together so quick and we've got a beautiful image. It's amazing. Woodland Moss, put that away. So now we have the details on the flowers, and I'm going to come in with a smaller stencil brush because I can really, it means that I can add a lot more ink in a sort of more concentrated fashion. So I'm going to come in with the red initially, just on the flowers. Now there is one detail that goes onto the leaf there, so it's up to you, but I would perhaps suggest avoiding that with the colour of the flower. We can come in with our stencil brushes because we've got the control and the detail. We can come in with the stencil brush and really pick that out in the green in a second. So I'm going to come in with the stencil brush with red initially, and then following the theme for the rest of the coloured layers that I've done, come in with the purple and just tip the bottom of these details. That will give an ombre look, and it will continue with that purple shading that we were having before. So I'll just tip that into there. Okay. And then obviously we want to add our green to the flower, to the leaf in the centre here. So this is Woodland Moss, and I'm just going to gently work that in amongst the flowers. Now I do have 2 colours of ink here. If you find that a little bit tricky, you can either size down again and use a smaller brush, or just take your stencil off, wipe away all the colours, and then put it back on and just stencil. And then you know that you're not going to get any of the purple or the red into that area there. If it doesn't bother you, then obviously just go for it. So there we are. We have our tulips stenciled. So I can take them off of there and I can really show you that detail with the colours and everything now. Now what I should really try, and perhaps some of you may give this a go, is use that technique, but instead of using a purple, perhaps use a purple colour in the interference inks, because then not only will you add that little bit of shading to be darker, but you'll also add that mica as well. So then you'll have that added extra of just that little bit of shine, which would be quite stunning as well, I'm sure. There is a dark purple. I can't think offhand what the name of it would be, but that would be something for you to try. I'd love to see that. So what I'm going to do now, I will die cut this and emboss for you. So I should just disappear briefly. Again, this is quite easy to line up. I'm just going to hold this in place, but obviously you can add a little bit of tape just to make sure it all stays put in your die cutting machine. Okay, so we have that die cut here. Now what I didn't do on this card actually is I didn't emboss the tulips. And I always forget to emboss, don't I, on the samples that I'm doing. And it is just a case of forgetting, because I'm so sort of focused on making the card and making sure that I know what I'm doing, that yeah, I do literally just forget to emboss, which I realised just too late. So I will emboss this one for you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you this as is. So if you are new to Lisa's products, let's check that lighting. There we are. So it's stunning as it is. You really don't need to emboss. But obviously when you do, it's the detail that you get, and you realise just how beautiful these embossing folders are. So I'm just lining that up. Yeah, so I'm concentrating, so I'll stop talking. Okay, so I'm just lining that up as it is. So I'm just going to run that through the machine now for you. Okay, I've only done one pass. I usually do two because I bring it back, but one pass is more than enough. If I take that off of there. Oh. It's really hard to show actually. Perhaps if I show you just down there, the detail that's come on. So that's really added, particularly in the flowers, that you can see the shading sort of really comes to life. Now what I'm going to do is now work on the base of the card for you. So I shall leave that sitting there. And I wanted to create something really quite fresh and quite summery. So we have this sort of landscape in the background. So this again is where you can practice your blending skills. So I'm going to take, it's probably best to use the largest of Lisa's blending brushes if you possibly can, and take a little bit of colour. So work onto a messy mat. This is one of Lisa's messy mats. I've just cut it down to size because it makes it a little bit easier for my desk, but it's a really nice surface to blend onto, because whenever you're blending and you want to colour tint a completely blank piece of cardstock, there's a few things you do need to remember, and I think it does come with practice. So you want to pick up your ink onto your brush, not too much initially, and before you even come onto your cardstock to blend, what you want to do is just get the motion of your brush on your blending mat. Now you're not wasting the ink, because the beauty of the blending mat is that it will release all of the ink that's put on there. So you get the motion of your brush onto your blending mat, and once you have that, then just gradually move this onto your cardstock, just keeping that going. You don't need to press particularly hard, and at this stage you'll possibly see not a huge amount is going on to the cardstock. I can see it here. So when you have that and you think that you've blended all of the ink from the brush, pick up some more ink and do the same. Start on your messy mat and work onto your cardstock. That way you will avoid, let's see if I can show you, I'm going to turn this over. You will avoid, that's not the best, let me show you with the Woodland moss. That will avoid having a block of ink on there that you will then struggle to blend out. So what you want to do is just work gradually and always work off the paper, get your motion going and come onto the paper. That way you will always end up with a really smooth blend, and you can start seeing that I've actually started to colour tint that cardstock there. So as you get more familiar with it, you can get faster. I always hold the brush. I find that's an easier way to hold that. You don't need to, because these brushes are designed to be flexible, like this, you see. And I always hold the brush at a slight angle to the cardstock. So let me show you. So although the brush here is actually shaped and domed, which helps, I still find it easier just to slightly tilt the brush away from the cardstock, so I'm not going directly onto it. There is a slight tilt, and that just helps me again get that soft blended look, and then that's what enables me to be able to move gradually from one side of the cardstock to the other, and you end up with this really nice diffused look. Okay. So I've got enough of the Margarita on that side, so I'm going to do the same now with the Surfs Up on this side. Now this blue looks so incredibly bright. Let me just take this off of, where are we? Let's take that off of there. Okay, so this blue looks so bright, but again, if you work with it in a really gentle way, it's perfect for the sky. So I'm just going to take some of that green away off my mat there. I'm going to pick up a little bit of ink. Because this is so bright, I'd be a little bit more gentle with the amount of ink that I pick up from there. Again, blend it onto the mat first, and you can see just how much ink there is there. What this is doing by going onto the mat first, it's diffusing the ink evenly onto your brush and into your brush, which then means when you come onto the paper, that is so smooth and controlled. And you're not having the sort of really tricky splodge of ink, for a better phrase. So now you can see that I've got such control, and I've got a really nice pale even blue sky. It's a shame we can't apply that to outside, isn't it, because the sky is far from looking like this at the moment, I can tell you. But we have the sky and the grass, and it is as simple as that. And if you wanted to build up the intensity of that colour, for any blending, if you were not even attempting to do like a landscape, if you just wanted to colour tint the card, all you need to do is just keep picking up the ink, applying it to your card in exactly the same way, and you will build up that intensity. So you can have something a lot brighter and bolder than what I've created here. So now I'm going to create the look of some fields in the background. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. If you have this set on you, which is the edge cuts, essential edges, they're not in stock at the moment, but I'm sure many of you will have these. Then what you can do is die cut yourself a template to use. Now you can see that I've got some here that I've already used and I've kept them. So I've cut the wavy ones which look like clouds. Can you see that there? Yeah, these ones look like clouds. This one is obviously the smoother one, which to me looks like fields. If you don't have this set, what you can do, take yourself a piece of copy paper. It can be cardstock if you want, but copy paper is a little bit easier to use because it's a lot more flexible to tear. And all you can do is just tear yourself a wavy piece of cardstock like that. You see here, this sort of will mimic the hills. If you don't like what you tore to start off with, try again. It is just copy paper at the end of the day. And then if you do make one that you like, keep hold of it. Okay, so I'm going to use this one. Now I've used this one before, as you can see, and you can see the ink here. What I want to do really is show you that the ink here is completely dried and it won't transfer onto this. I will eventually get to a stage where I'll replace this. So what I want to do, working into the green, create just like a series of hills really. It doesn't have to be exact, there's no science to it, it's just adding a little bit of texture into what you're doing. So I'm going to use the Woodland moss, pick up a little bit of ink, and exactly the same technique, work from the messy mat onto the cardstock. And what this copy paper is doing is acting like a template. Now what you need to do is bear with me. Now I'm going from the messy mat and then I'm working from the template onto the cardstock, because that's the way that the paper is liking me to do this. If I go up this way, it's going to sort of scrunch the template up a little bit. So I'm working like this. Now if you want to add slightly more ink, I would say, to these front layers than the back ones, then that would look a little bit more pleasing to the eye. But when I take that away, we have our first mound sitting there. So it's actually quite deceiving, the amount of ink that you're putting on. So do just keep checking back. this is so simple to realign if you haven't put enough on and you just wanted to add a bit more. Now I'm just going to realign this template now and just put that here. It may overlap a little bit, just that's fine. So I'm going to add a bit more ink on this side. Probably not put quite so much on this time. You see, we are adding, contouring basically the landscape here. And this, the beauty of doing this is it will look different every single time. You want to add some interest, and perhaps the further back you get into the landscape, as it were, if you know some of the hills are further away, you put less ink on. But again, you'll find your way of doing this and what would look good to your eye. So we have another hill going on there. So you see, it just adds a bit of interest to your landscape. So I'm gonna, I mean, you can even turn your stencil over like this. So I'm going to perhaps do that and add a bit of detail just here. Now it is slightly going into the sky, but that's fine because that means we'll end up with sort of no white patches. When you look off into the fields, the landscape, the sky and the fields do end up merging together, don't they? So I'm going to leave that like that, and you can just see that we have just a bit more interest in there that's going on. You can do the same for sky, and you can create sort of texture in the sky in the form of clouds. Perhaps I'll just show you briefly with this piece here. I'm just going to pick up the blue brush. I'm not going to pick up any more ink. I'm just going to use what's there. I'm just going to stencil like that. It's just going to create a little bit of texture in the sky. Not a huge amount, but enough just to take the plainness away, I think. And it's something that I may be able to see more than you. Perhaps I'll pick up a little bit more. Just do that. There we are. It really is just a case of playing a little bit. There we are. So you can see here we don't have a plain piece of cardstock with just sort of flat blended ink onto it. There's a little bit of texture, a little bit of interest going on there. Now, because this is going to be a background, I don't need it to be sort of any more detailed than that. But it's something that you can spend hours on, and it can be a real masterpiece, especially if it's going to take sort of front stage on your project. Now, on this original card, I've just added some sort of little red dots just to sort of perhaps mimic the tulips in the foreground here. Now, as I said, I did use a stamp from a little cheeky set that Lisa bought as a one-off to create and craft for us. Just a little stamp there. So if you don't have that, you can do paint splats with a paintbrush, or maybe if you have the texture stamps, you can just use some of this detail here just to add a little bit of detail in the front. So maybe I shall do that for you now, because this is something that Lisa does have in stock regularly. If it's not in stock at the moment, I'm sure it will come back by huge demand. So this is going to be a little bit more abstract. But what I'll do, I think, is I'm going to use this larger paint splat in the front. It's going to look different to what I've created here. And this time round, I will actually put this on a stamping block. If you remember, I used this on Tuesday and I didn't use a stamping block, but I want a different effect this time round. I'm going to, I just want to choose the right area of the stamp, really. Yeah, I'll use this area, and I'm not going to use the whole stamp because I don't want to cover all of this area. But what I'll do, I'll just take my red ink, the coral ink, and I'm just going to stamp just the top section of it like this. Okay. I'm going to wipe away because I don't want these larger areas. Now, instead of stamping this straight onto my project, I'm going to stamp it onto my messy mats to start with, take away a lot of the ink, blot it off, and just put that on the front, because we just need that to be a hint of colour on the front. And you can see that that actually works really, really well. So I'm going to do the same again. So I'm going to ink the stamp. I know the area that I want to use now. So I'm not using the whole stamp at all. I'm going to blot off some of the ink that I've already put on and just do exactly the same, but move along. And because this stamp is really irregular, there's no lining up to be done on this, so you can just sort of place this where it suits. So I'm going to put that along, blot that off on the side, and just add that there. And that actually has worked really well. Actually, it's probably worked better than what I've done there. I'll show you the difference between the two. That was the original one, and that is the one that we have now. There we are. That's actually worked really well, because you've got the different sized flower heads, as it were. That's what we're trying to simulate there. Okay, so I'm actually really pleased with that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to mount this onto a piece of grey card, so just a small matten layer. Now, the size of this, I tried to work it out to be about just over half of the front of the cardstock for you. So that's what looked good to my eye. If you want this wider or smaller or shorter, then go with that. Say it really is a case of going with what looks good to your eye, because that's the way that you'll be pleased with your card then, to look, you know, to work with a dimension that, or measurements that work for your eye. And everybody's different, and everybody will make different dimensions work really well. So I've already embossed the backgrounds. Again, this is the wood panel background. Because we are using the card in landscape, and obviously the wood panels are working down the way, but I think that works really nicely. It's the perfect size for the size card that I'm making, so I'm going to put this straight on there. It looks smart because what I have done this time is left the border around the outside of this embossing, and I'm going to layer the landscape on the front. Now, the beauty of these cards is that you can attach them and assemble them all flat, as I'm doing here, or if you use 3D foam, again, that will just give it a whole different look. But I think they work both ways. Now, what I should have done actually was stamp that. Now, what I'm going to do now, which is what I should have done before I stamped all of this together, before I attached all of this together, was actually stamp the sentiment. So I'm going a little bit rogue doing this. If you're not happy doing this, perhaps what I would suggest, or if you're not comfortable doing it this way, is to stamp your sentiment onto a piece of cardstock and then stick it on. Or if you use a die cut sentiment, that would work equally as well. But I've literally just forgot to do this because I was chatting away to you, so I wasn't necessarily concentrating on what I was doing. So I've just taken the sentiment. It's a lovely set of sentiments, actually. They're small, really cute, got a lovely font, and then you have the typewriter font, so it will suit all occasions. So I'm going to put this onto a stamping block and just stamp this in black. So I'm using the black VersaFine, but Lisa's black ink, which I need to replace, actually, will work equally as well. And I'm just going to stamp that simply into the top corner there. I'll just leave that to set while the ink takes. So we have a lovely sentiment sitting there. Now that, again, I would place that in relation to the flowers that you're going to use. Now, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can stencil and die cut more than one of these and line them up all along the bottom if you want to. You can just have this one die cut and attach it in position, trim off the bottom and have it that way. Or what I would do in the way that I've done here is actually cut into this die cut and just separate some of the blooms, and that's easily done. I'm going to take this flower away, and that can be easily done by just snipping along this leaf here, and that gives us a nice clean cut, a nice clean line, so we're not sort of snipping randomly. So again, if you wanted to just add one, then I think that looks stunning as well. You could arrange your die cuts in this way. Again, just have a play. I'm going to add these tulips perhaps slightly differently. No, I'm going to add most of it on there. I've stenciled them now. They look pretty, so they should all be on the card. And I should put this one. You can either actually have that there, because naturally that would come off the side of the card, wouldn't it? And you'd need to snip it off anyway. So you can actually replace that there if you wanted to, or just in there like so. Again, this is where you can have a little faff or be a little bit indecisive, pretty much like I am a lot of the time. But what I'm going to do is attach the flowers like that, I think. I have a little bit of leeway there with the envelope that I'll be putting this into, so that flower can slightly overlap, or you can just add that like that. There we are. Right, so let's get this stuck down. Again, you can use 3D foam on these if you don't mind the extra dimension. But because you have the embossing in the background and the embossing on the flower, again, you have that dimension sitting there anyway. So I'm going to attach that like so. There. And the same with this flower on this side. And I think it's nice actually that you have one of the tulips over this side. It just balances the card out nicely. And then once they're stuck and you know that they're in position, you can just take your scissors and literally snip those down to size. So now it looks like those die cuts are always meant to be the size that they are. We put our brushes in there. Okay, there we are. So now we have the two cards attached. So depending on the colour that you do this, again, this can make the tone of the card look completely different. You can invert the background. You can use a darker background and therefore have a nice white border, white tulips maybe. That would be a really nice way of doing it. But yeah, you can make, say, the tone of this card, the feel of the card look completely different depending on the colours that you're choosing. So yeah, completely different card inspiration for you using the tulips there today. So I haven't actually had a chance to look at your comments. Okay, so Dawn's saying the texture stamps are in stock. Oh, perfect. Yeah, I would actually say that the texture stamps work better than the polka dots there. Yeah, I really like that fact. It's possibly something I can try again. I can have a read through your comments afterwards. So hopefully that's given you just another different way to use your tulip designs. And if I just bring that one in again now, again, I've created the background on this here. So that's a nice sort of go-to video for you, just to give you just a little few ideas on how to use your tulips. And also we have die cut tulips as well, which are just a set of dies, so you could incorporate that and really build up your layers and create quite a bouquet of tulips also. So I think I might leave that there for you this afternoon. Thanks so much for joining me. It's lovely to have you here. Don't forget, we have Lisa on a live tomorrow evening, the usual Friday chats along with her. So I'm not sure what's coming up, so yeah, it's definitely worth tuning into it. There's always some lovely snippet or some sneak peeks that she's able to show us. So I'll leave it there with you for today. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and I shall see you all again next week. Take care, everyone.